I sat by the window last night holding my phone like it carried my whole life. The street outside was quiet, only a few cars passing, their lights moving across the walls of my living room. From the outside, everything looked calm, safe, ordinary. Inside, my chest felt heavy as if I could hardly breathe. My name is Emily. I am 32 years old and I live in a small suburb just outside of Dallas, Texas. If you asked my neighbors, they would tell you that I have a good life. A loving husband. A nice home with white curtains and a little garden in the back. People see me smile when I wave at them and they think I am happy. But the truth is, I have been living with a lie for years. I looked down at the photo frame on the table. It was from our wedding day. My husband, Daniel, was holding my hand, his smile wide, his eyes full of hope. I was smiling too, but when I looked closer, even that day, there was something in my eyes. A distance. A quiet sadness no one else noticed. From the outside, our marriage looks beautiful. Inside, it feels like glass that could break at any moment. Daniel still tells me he loves me. He still brings flowers on some Fridays, still holds my hand when we walk into a restaurant. But he doesn't really see me anymore. He forgets things that matter. My favorite coffee order. The book I told him I loved last week. Even my birthday last year, he came home late holding a random box of chocolates like he had remembered only at the last minute. At first, I thought these were small things. Everyone forgets sometimes, right? But slowly those little moments piled up and they became something bigger. They became proof of something I didn't want to admit. That maybe I was invisible to him. And yet what hurt most wasn't that he forgot. It was the way it started to feel like he wanted to forget. Like forgetting me was easier than remembering who I really was. Last night, I sat in the dark living room, the glow of my phone lighting my face, and I realized something I had been running from for a long time. Daniel hadn't forgotten me by mistake. He had forgotten me on purpose. Every morning, the sunlight comes through my white curtains, filling the room with a soft golden glow. To anyone passing by, it looks peaceful. Like the beginning of another perfect day. But for me, mornings feel heavy. I wake up beside Daniel, but most days I feel like I am waking up alone. I go through the same routine every day. I make coffee, I pack his lunch, I water the little flowers by the window. Neighbors see me smiling as I wave at them while taking out the trash and they think, she has such a good life. They don't see the silence that follows me inside. Our house is big enough to hold laughter, yet so often it is filled with quiet. Daniel works long hours and when he comes home he usually kisses me on the cheek, asks how my day was and then disappears into his phone or his computer. We sit at the same dinner table but it feels like two strangers sharing space, not two people sharing love. Sometimes he still brings me flowers. Bright red roses, tied in shiny plastic from the supermarket. I smile, I thank him, I put them in a vase on the kitchen counter. But the truth is, those flowers feel like decorations for a life that doesn't exist anymore. He gives them because it is what husbands are supposed to do, not because his heart is reaching for mine. It wasn't always this way. In the early years I felt safe with him. His steady presence was like a calm river after the storm I had lived through before. But slowly over time that river turned into a wall. His love became routine and my heart went quiet. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe the first time he forgot our anniversary and laughed it off like it wasn't important. Maybe when I told him I wanted to take a class at the community center, and he shrugged and said, if you think it's worth it. Or maybe it was simply all the little moments piled together. Small cracks that turned into a canyon. The hardest part is that from the outside our marriage still looks perfect. People tell me I'm lucky. They see Daniel as a good man, a hardworking husband. And in many ways he is. But what they don't see is that I feel like a prisoner in my own life. A prison built not of stone but of smiles, routines, and silence. I try to remind myself that he cares. He does things, fixes the car, pays the bills, asks if I've eaten. But caring is not the same as loving. And somewhere deep inside I know the truth. I am no longer the woman who lives in his heart. One night a few weeks ago he came home with takeout from my favorite restaurant. He set the table, lit candles, and smiled at me like he was trying. For a moment I almost believed things could change. We ate together and I thanked him softly, trying to hold on to that little piece of hope. Then as we sat in the warm light of the candles he cleared his throat and said, Emily, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we start trying for a baby. My fork froze in my hand. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Baby? The word echoed in my mind. He was talking about creating a future together, while I wasn't even sure we still had a present. I forced a smile, nodded slightly, but my hands trembled under the table. I wanted to tell him the truth, that the thought of bringing a child into this silence terrified me. That the idea of raising a baby in a house where love felt like dust on old furniture made my chest ache. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there chewing slowly, pretending everything was fine. Pretending was easier than breaking the fragile glass of our marriage. Later that night, after he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The word baby circled in my head like a storm I couldn't escape. And in that quiet darkness, I realized something that made my heart sink deeper than ever before. He wasn't just forgetting me now. He was planning a future where I didn't even exist as myself anymore. I wasn't Emily to him, I was just a role. A wife. A mother. A shadow standing beside him. The next morning, as I folded his jacket before hanging it up, something slipped out of the pocket and fell onto the floor. At first I thought it was nothing, just a receipt. But when I picked it up, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a receipt. It was a small, folded piece of paper. And inside was something that made my hands shake so hard I almost dropped it. That was the moment everything began to change. The small folded paper shook in my hand. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly, like it might break if I rushed. It was not a receipt. It was a thin card from the dry cleaner near the grocery store, the one on Maple Street. On the corner, the clerk had written a name in quick blue ink. I stared at those letters. The room felt colder, even though the afternoon sun was coming through the blinds. Hale. It was such a simple thing. 4 letters and a last name. But my body knew it before my mind did. My throat tightened. The smell of fresh soap and warm cotton seemed to rise from the paper, and with it, a scent I had not let myself think about for years. Clean skin, a little cedar, a little mint. Ryan. I closed my eyes. The years fell away like dust. 4 summers ago I met him at a small concert in the city. It was July, hot even at night. I went with a friend from work because I didn't want to be alone that weekend. My friend left early, but I stayed. The band played a slow song, and I stood near the back with a drink in my hand, watching the lights move like soft rain over the stage. He was standing a few feet away, tall, a little quiet, with a kind smile. He asked if I liked the song. I said yes. He said it felt like the sound of a long drive at night. We talked about nothing and also about everything. I told him my name. He told me his. We stood side by side for the rest of the show, and somehow when the last note faded I felt like I had known him for a long time. After that night we saw each other almost every day. We walked by the lake, shared tacos in a small place that stayed open late, and took pictures of sunrises like teenagers. He listened when I spoke. He remembered every small thing. The way I took my coffee. The poem I kept on a sticky note near my mirror. The way my hands shook when I was scared and how to hold them so they would be still. I had never felt so seen. It wasn't perfect. He was working 2 jobs. Money was tight for both of us. I worried too much about the future. But even with the worry, there was a lightness in me, like the first warm day of spring. I would wake up smiling for no reason. Then his mother got sick. He told me on a Tuesday when the sky was gray and the air smelled like rain. He needed to go back to his hometown for a while, just until things were stable. He promised to call. He promised it was not goodbye. I believed him. I hugged him at the bus station and whispered, "Come back to me." He nodded into my hair. First we spoke every night. He sent me photos of a small porch, a stray cat, his mother's knitted blanket. I sent him silly messages and pictures of the city so he would not feel far. Then the calls slowed. He said he was tired. He said the hospital hours were long. I said I understood. A week went by. Then I left him a voice note and another and another. No reply. The last thing I remember sending was a photo of the moon, big and quiet, with the words, "I miss you." The message stayed unread. I checked his social media. Nothing new. I texted his friend who said he hadn't heard from him either. My chest felt hollow. I told myself he was busy, that he would call when he could. But a cold thought kept repeating in my head. He left. I cried for days. Then I told myself to stop. I deleted our photos from my phone. I put the concert ticket in a shoebox and pushed it to the back of my closet. I blocked his number because I could not stand the way my hand shook every time my phone buzzed. It was too much. I could not keep living like a wound. I told myself I had to move on. That I had to forget. For a while I managed to live like a ghost of myself. Work, sleep, work, sleep. One Sunday morning I went to the store and ran into Daniel in the cereal aisle. He had been in my night class once. A quiet man with neat hair, steady hands, and a soft way of speaking. He knew about books and bike repair and how to make a good omelet. He asked how I had been. I said good, even though I wasn't. He laughed at something I said and I felt a small piece of me relax, like my shoulders fell 2 inches. He asked for coffee. I said yes because saying no felt like staying in a room with no windows. Daniel took me to a diner with blue booths and kind waiters. He listened. He did not push. He did not ask about my past. I liked that. I liked the way he looked at me like I was a person in the present, not a story in the past. With him there were no big highs, no big lows. There was steadiness. There was soup when I was sick and new wiper blades on my car when it rained. After a few months he asked if I wanted to try being us. I said yes because I wanted to believe that soft can be enough. I wanted to believe that safe could be a kind of love. 6 months later we married in a small garden behind a library. My dress was simple. We ate cake from paper plates and laughed when a bee tried to steal the frosting. My mother cried. Daniel's father hugged me for a long time. And all through the day I kept thinking, you are choosing peace, Emily. You are choosing a life with solid ground. I wanted so badly for that to be true. But even in those first months, there were moments when quiet hit me like a wall. A song in a store would stop me in my tracks. A cedar candle at a friend's house would make my chest tight. A summer night would smell like July again and I would feel a ripple under my skin. I never said the name out loud, not even to myself. I pushed it down, down, down. I told myself this was healing. That silence meant I was over it. I was not. One afternoon about a year after our wedding, I saw Ryan at the far end of a grocery store. He was standing by the apples, head bent, choosing carefully like he used to. I froze. My heart beat so hard it hurt. He looked up for a second and for a moment I thought our eyes met. I stepped behind a display of cereal boxes and held my breath until he turned away. When I got back to the car my hands were shaking so much I could not put the key in the ignition. I did not tell Daniel. I kept building a life on top of a buried thing. Now sitting on my bed with the dry cleaner card in my hand, I felt that buried thing rise. Hail. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was a common name. Maybe the clerk was messy with letters. But I knew what my body knew. I went to the closet and pulled down the old shoebox I had pushed into the dark years ago. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside there was the concert ticket, a movie stub, a note he had left on my door that said, "Lake at 6? Bring a sweater." I held the ticket and felt my throat sting. I had told myself I kept this box because it was a part of my past, and pasts can live on a shelf without hurting anyone. But pasts do not live still. They breathe when you do. They wake up when you do. I put the items back and closed the lid. I told myself I was only visiting a memory, not moving in. I stood up and returned to the bed. I slid the dry cleaner card into the pocket of Daniel's jacket where I found it, as if returning it could undo what it had done to me. For the rest of the day I walked around the house like I was underwater. I folded towels. I answered emails. I stirred a pot of soup and watched it turn in slow circles. When Daniel came home I smiled and kissed his cheek and he told me about his day. My voice sounded normal. My hands were steady. Inside there was a noise like a soft siren that would not stop. That night I lay beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing. I thought about choice. How I had chosen Daniel because he felt like safety after a storm. How I had chosen silence because it felt like healing when I was tired of pain. How I had chosen to forget because remembering was like standing near a fire and holding still. But forgetting is not quiet. It is loud work. It is a weight you carry every day. I turned on my side and stared at the small glow of my phone on the nightstand. I did not want to open the shoebox again. I did not want to say his name. I only wanted to sleep. I only wanted to be the person my neighbors thought I was. I must have fallen asleep for a while because when I opened my eyes, the room was dark and the house was silent. My phone buzzed once. Just once. I reached for it without thinking. There was a message on the screen from an unknown number. No name, just a number I did not recognize. The first line said, "Emily, it's me." My heart stopped and started again. I sat up in bed, the sheet pooling around my waist. My hands shook so hard I could hardly tap the screen. The next line came, "I'm sorry. I should have called years ago." I stared at the words. The room felt like it was spinning. I read the message again and again as if it might turn into something else if I looked long enough. The dry cleaner card. The shoebox. The scent in my head. The siren in my chest. They all came together and pointed in one direction. 4 years of silence. And now this. I did not wake Daniel. I did not type back. I put the phone face down and pressed my hands to my eyes. The past I buried had not died. It had only learned my address. The screen lit again, and this time the message used the name I had not heard spoken in 4 years. It's Ryan. The morning after Ryan's message, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone lying face down beside my cup of coffee. The words were burned into my mind. "Emily, it's me. I'm sorry." I had not answered, and I told myself I would never answer. Still, the thought of those words stayed with me, pulling at me in every quiet moment. Daniel came into the kitchen that morning, kissed my forehead, and began talking about a meeting he had at work. I smiled and nodded, stirring sugar into my cup as if nothing had changed. On the outside I looked the same. On the inside I was trembling. My heart was not beating in rhythm with the life I was pretending to live. So I carried on pretending. I told myself that if I acted normal, the storm inside me would calm. For breakfast I smiled. At the grocery store I chatted politely with the cashier. At dinner with Daniel's parents, I laughed at a joke I didn't even hear. My mask was fixed so tightly to my face that no one could see the cracks underneath. But at night, when Daniel was asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My phone glowed softly on the nightstand. Sometimes it buzzed with another message. "Are you there? Please, just one word." I never typed a reply. I wanted to desperately, but I didn't. Instead, I pressed my face into the pillow, my chest shaking with silent sobs until morning came. The days blurred into weeks, and still I held my silence. Daniel spoke to me about his projects at work, about a colleague's promotion, about a plan for us to take a weekend trip. I listened, or at least I looked like I did. But inside I felt far away, as if there was a thick wall between us. His words reached my ears but not my heart. I moved through the house, cooked meals, folded laundry, and lay beside him at night, all the while carrying a weight I could not put down. One afternoon I met my friend Laura for coffee. She studied me across the table with a concerned frown. "Emily, are you okay? You don't look like yourself." I forced a small laugh and told her I was just tired, but she didn't believe me. She reached for my hand, held it firmly, and said softly, "You look like someone carrying a love that isn't yours." The words made my chest ache. For a second I thought about telling her everything. The shoebox, the messages, the ghost of Ryan that haunted me. But I swallowed the truth. I only nodded and looked out the window at the cars passing on the street. She squeezed my hand once more and whispered, "Don't let silence eat you alive. Talk to him. Or talk to someone." Her words followed me home, echoing in my ears, heavier than any secret. That night I stood at the sink washing dishes. The water was warm and the soap bubbles clung to my skin as I whispered under my breath, not even realizing the words were escaping. "Ryan, why now? Why come back?" I didn't know Daniel was standing in the doorway. "Who are you talking to?" he asked quietly. My body froze. The plate slipped in my hand, clattering against the sink. I turned too quickly, heat rushing to my face, and said, "No one." He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He only looked at me for a long moment, his eyes calm but heavy, before walking away. His silence hurt more than if he had shouted. It was the silence of someone who already knew. From that night I avoided mirrors. When I caught my reflection, I no longer saw the woman I thought I was. I saw a ghost. A wife who smiled in front of neighbors, a woman who cooked dinner, a body that kept moving but a heart that had stopped long ago. Daniel noticed. He asked if I was tired, if I needed a break. He suggested a vacation, maybe somewhere warm by the ocean. I smiled and said it sounded lovely, but deep down I knew no vacation could fix what was broken. I could be on the other side of the world and I would still feel the same emptiness. One evening Laura called me again. She said she had been thinking about me and that she knew I was hiding something. "Emily," she begged, "please talk to me." My lips trembled and I almost told her everything, but instead I said the same words I always said, "I'm fine." "Really?" After I hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the cold tiles and cried until my body hurt. I kept the sobs quiet, afraid that Daniel would hear from the bedroom. The truth was too sharp and I wasn't ready to cut our lives open with it. But silence doesn't heal you. It only makes the wound deeper. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening. We were sitting at the dinner table eating pasta. Daniel looked up with a small smile and said, "I heard about a house that's for sale nearby. It has a big yard. Plenty of room for kids." My fork slipped from my hand. My chest tightened. He kept talking about schools, about space, about how good it would be for us. His voice was steady, gentle, but to me it was nothing but noise. The ringing in my ears drowned everything else out. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed my chair back and walked into the bedroom without finishing my meal. He followed quickly, his voice laced with worry. "Emily, what's wrong?" I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." His face drained of color. "Do what?" he asked. I lifted my eyes to his and said the word I had been hiding for years, "Pretend." The room went quiet. I could feel the weight of his stare and I knew he was waiting for more. My body trembled, my throat burned, but the words stayed trapped inside me. I wanted to confess everything but I couldn't. I wasn't ready. Daniel sat beside me and placed his hand gently on my shoulder. His touch was soft, but there was sadness in it, as if he already understood. "Emily," he whispered, "what aren't you telling me?" My lips parted, but the truth did not come out. I stayed silent. And in that silence I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the quiet heaviness in his shoulders. He knew. Maybe he had known for a long time. He just never said it out loud. That night as he slept beside me, I lay awake with tears sliding down my face. The silence between us was louder than any argument could have been. It pressed against me, crushed me, and I finally understood. Pretending hadn't healed me. Pretending had broken me. And if I didn't speak, if I didn't face the truth, this silence would not only destroy me, it would destroy us both. She said I looked like someone carrying a love that wasn't mine. That's when I stopped pretending. The silence between Daniel and me grew heavier after that night. We spoke about ordinary things, groceries, bills, the weather, but underneath every word was the truth we were not saying. My body moved through each day like it belonged to someone else. I cooked dinner, I folded clothes, I lay down beside him in bed, but my heart felt far away, almost like it was standing at the edge of a cliff waiting to fall. One evening, a week after the night I whispered that I could not pretend anymore, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He set his briefcase by the door and looked at me with an expression that made my stomach twist. His eyes were tired but steady, as if he had been preparing for this moment. "Emily," he said softly, "we need to talk." I nodded, though my chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where we had eaten 100 quiet dinners. This time there was no food, no small talk. Just silence waiting for one of us to break it. I folded my hands on the table and stared at the wood grain. "Daniel," I whispered, "I don't know how to start." "Just tell me," he said. His voice wasn't sharp, not angry. It was almost gentle but heavy with something I couldn't name. I closed my eyes and felt tears burn behind my lids. "I'm not here anymore. Not really. I tried to be, I wanted to be, but I can't pretend that my heart is whole when it isn't." He stayed quiet, waiting. That silence made my words spill faster. "Before you there was someone else. I thought I buried it, I thought I moved on, but I didn't. I married you because you felt safe and I wanted safety so badly. I thought I could build a new life and forget everything. But the truth is I never healed. I carried the past with me into our marriage and now it's breaking me, and it's breaking us." Daniel's eyes didn't leave mine. He didn't flinch. He didn't shout. His hands rested calmly on the table. When he finally spoke, his words were like a soft knife. I already knew. My breath caught. What? He nodded slowly. I knew, Emily. Maybe not the details. Maybe not the name. But I knew from the start that your heart wasn't fully mine. I hoped over time it would be. I hoped love could grow in the spaces where pain used to live. But deep down I always felt the distance. Tears slid down my face. Why didn't you say anything? Because I loved you, he said simply. And sometimes love means staying quiet, hoping that silence can give the other person time to heal. But silence didn't heal you. It only hid the wound. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. It was not the wild sobs of anger or betrayal. It was the slow, aching cry of a heart breaking in quiet. I never wanted to hurt you, I whispered through the tears. I know, he said. His voice trembled, but he didn't look away. And I don't blame you. You gave me what you could. But love shouldn't feel like begging for a part of someone's soul. I don't want to live like that anymore. And you shouldn't either. The words hung between us, heavy but true. For the first time in years there were no lies, no pretending, no masks. Just two people sitting in the ruins of what they had tried to build. We sat in silence for a long time. The clock ticked on the wall, each second stretching like an echo. My hands shook as I reached for my water glass, but I didn't drink. My throat was too tight. Finally, I whispered, "So what do we do now?" Daniel let out a long breath. We let go. Not because we hate each other. Not because we failed. But because holding on is killing us. I shook my head slowly, tears still sliding down. Letting go feels like dying. He reached across the table and touched my hand. His palm was warm, steady. No, Emily. Holding on to something that isn't real, that's dying. Letting go, maybe that's living again. The kindness in his words hurt more than anger ever could. I wanted him to scream, to demand, to fight. Instead, he gave me nothing to fight against. He gave me the truth, soft and unshakable. That night I packed a small bag. Just a few clothes, my journal, and a photo of us from the early days. Daniel stood in the doorway watching. His face was calm, but his eyes were red. I zipped the bag and turned toward him. For a moment, I thought I might fall to my knees and beg him to let me stay. But I didn't. My body moved on its own, step by step, toward the front door. As I put my hand on the doorknob, Daniel's voice broke the silence. Emily. I turned. He stood in the middle of the room, his hands at his sides, his face pale but steady. His voice was soft, almost like a prayer. Thank you for not lying one last time. The words hit me like a wave. My chest ached so hard I could hardly breathe. I wanted to run back, to hold him, to erase the years of silence. But it was too late. The truth was spoken and there was no going back. I opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. The street was quiet, the houses dark. Behind me the door clicked shut. For the first time in years I felt the weight of freedom and the weight of grief all at once. I walked to my car, my bag heavy on my shoulder, and sat behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face. In the silence, his words echoed again and again. I already knew. It was the saddest kindness I had ever been given. I left. And as I closed the door, he said, "Thank you for not lying one last time." The first night alone was the hardest. I sat in a small apartment I had rented just a few miles from our old house. The walls were bare, the floor cold, and the silence felt too wide for me to carry. I curled up on the mattress I had dragged into the corner and cried until the sun came up. The city outside went on like nothing had happened. Cars passing, dogs barking, people laughing on the sidewalk. My world had ended, yet the world outside kept moving. In the days that followed, I learned what silence really meant. It wasn't just the quiet of an empty apartment. It was the way the mornings felt longer without Daniel beside me. It was making coffee for one instead of two. It was the way I reached for my phone to tell him something, only to remember there was no one to tell. The silence pressed against me heavy, but slowly I started to find space inside it. I began to write. At first only a few lines in a notebook, shaky and unsure. Then pages and pages poured out of me. Memories, confessions, regrets, and prayers. Some nights I walked for hours through the neighborhood, listening to the sound of my own footsteps, letting the cool air wash over me. Healing didn't come fast. It came slowly in small breaths, in the way the air felt lighter with each day I survived. There were moments I missed Daniel so much I could hardly breathe. I missed his steady voice, the way he always remembered to check the locks, the smell of his coffee in the morning. But missing him didn't mean I belonged with him anymore. Love and leaving can exist in the same heart, and I was learning to live with both. One afternoon, while unpacking a box of books, I found something I didn't expect. Tucked between the pages of a novel was a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was Daniel's. The note was short, only one sentence, but it felt like a weight lifting and a weight pressing down all at once. I hope one day you remember yourself the way I couldn't. I pressed the note to my chest and cried, not the broken sobs of despair, but the quiet tears of someone who finally understood. He hadn't forgotten me because he didn't care. He had forgotten me because he didn't know how else to live with the truth, that I was never fully his. Forgetting me was his way of surviving. And leaving him was mine. The weeks turned into months. Slowly I began to see beauty in small things again. The warmth of sunlight on my skin, the laughter of children playing outside, the comfort of writing my thoughts and reading them back. My scars didn't vanish, but they softened. The silence no longer felt like a punishment. It became a place where I could breathe, where I could learn who I was without pretending. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if love will find me again or if I will spend the rest of my life walking these quiet streets alone. But I know this. I am not the same woman who stared at her phone waiting for a message, or the wife who folded laundry while hiding a storm in her chest. I am someone learning slowly and painfully to live with honesty. And maybe that is enough. So if you are listening to me now and you have ever felt like I did, unseen, forgotten, carrying a love that was never really yours, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Your silence does not have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning. Sometimes we lose people not because love was absent, but because love wasn't enough. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let go. I folded Daniel's note back into the book that day, but the words will stay with me always. I hope one day you remember yourself the way I couldn't. And maybe finally I am starting to. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments.